welcome all. I'm Stephen Huffnagel, Executive Director of Coastal Rivers Conservation Trust. And we've just really completed one full year as the joint organization. And it's very strange to be moving from the format where we had 3 different ponders meetings all in person last summer. And we missed the chance to all be together with you this summer in person. But it's great to be able to have some people visiting from all the way from New York in Doris's case and from right nearby. And so we're adapting to this hopefully temporary new reality and still getting together for a ponders meeting. This is all the ponders from all the meetings and those who love ponds as well. I grew up on the Mianus River in Bedford, New York, on a pond of about 20 acres, so much smaller than some of our Pemaquid ponds on the Pemaquid watershed. And I watched as trout, which were so prevalent when I was a kid, we used to fish all the time with trout, started falling away because of water quality reductions. We had a lot of sediment come in, we had upstream development. We had a neighbor who cut down buffers and started putting on fertilizer. And we didn't have a pond association or any way to really address some of those questions. We had some informal meetings with neighbors and told the new neighbor to what some of the impacts were, but it was not a structured way to do it. In contrast, the Bisky Pond Association, which started in 1966, has been working ever since for water quality. That became PWA and then joined with DRA to become Coastal Rivers. And it's a combination of education and outreach and water quality efforts, as well as land conservation. So I want to emphasize both DRA and PWA became land trusts in part because land conservation is one of the biggest tools for addressing water quality, particularly because you're creating these sponges and filters right on the edge and maintaining meaningful forest cover. And through the land conservation that we've done all together and so much more ahead, we're doing so much to conserve water quality. And so if you are interested in conserving your land with a conservation easement or through a gift of land to the association, we'd love to talk to you. We've got Joan Ray on the call, who is our Director of Land Conservation. And the heart of the presentation, after our wonderful speaker, Tracy Hart, will be all guided by our MC, Sarah Gladue, who's our Director of Education and Citizen Science, so all of our water quality efforts. And we're very sad that this is the end of this summer. We'll be saying goodbye to Carolyn Schubert, who's been with us for so many years, and that the water quality efforts will be carried forward by Sarah Gladue. And we are wishing Carolyn fair winds in the around the world sailing trip ahead, which we hope the ports will open soon. She was going to leave us this spring. And of course, the Americans are not welcome in foreign ports at this moment. And she has delayed the trip, and we happily were able to extend her resignation time for 4 months and right through the end of the summer. And we'll be very sad for her leaving us at the end of August.
It's not around the world, it's only the Atlantic circuit. And
it sounds far to me, but you were all the way to Ireland and down the coast, and
it's still in the Atlantic circuit.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we're
not Magellan.
Yes. Well, we're looking forward to the postcards and hoping that those ports open soon. So with that, I turn over to Sarah Gladue to share about many of the programs happening. But before turning it over, I want to thank all of our volunteers. This is an unusual time where some of our volunteer-based efforts have been supplemented by some interns as well. But everything that we do remains volunteer-driven. It's the heart of the operation. And so my thanks to all of you. And with that, I turn it over to Sarah Gladue. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us this evening. It's wonderful. And welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning into our Ponders meeting via Zoom. It's wonderful to have you all here, and look forward to chatting with you this evening. First, I just want to give you a little sense of what we're going to be about this evening, how we're going to proceed, and do a little housekeeping with you so we kind of know all the ins and outs of working together on Zoom. I do want to mention that Hannah put out a poll for me, so if you are just logging on and you want to check out the poll and go ahead and try that out, go ahead. You do have to apparently answer all the questions or it won't let you save it and submit it. But enjoy that, and we'll share what our findings are at the end, although I realize that there may be some, I don't know, lack of appropriate responses for some people, so I apologize for that. But at any rate, so this evening, I think what we're going to start with is we're very happy to have Tracy Hart from Audubon, and she's going to be talking about loons with us. And so we're really fortunate to have her join us. And then I'm going to jump in after she's had a chance to answer some of your questions. We'll have a little time for questions with her. And then I want to jump in and share with you some information about data and information related to our ponds and freshwater environments in this region. And then I want to talk about programs and new initiatives. And we'll wrap that up with some of the folks who are attending this evening were able to submit questions ahead of time. And that was helpful so that we can attend to those questions. And then if we need to wrap those, we'll wrap up the program with those questions. So that's what where we're going to start today. So like I said, we're really happy to have Tracy Hart join us. Tracy and I actually worked together some time ago. We were both working for Maine Sea Grant at the time. And then Tracy ended up moving away for a period of time, actually to American Samoa, and moved back, and we just connected. And it turns out we both have 14-year-old daughters, and so it was nice to reconnect. Tracy joined Maine Audubon as a wildlife ecologist in 2019, and she brings over 2 decades of experience in wildlife conservation and environmental education to that organization. She is managing the Loon Project as one of her primary projects, and she grew up in Freeport and spent her childhood exploring islands and forests in the Casco Bay area. She holds a bachelor's degree from Brown University and MS in conservation biology and sustainable development from the University of Maryland. So we're really happy to have you join us, Tracy, and it's a great opportunity for us to really focus our attention on loons this evening for a little bit, which are a very cherished part of living around the water here, and hearing them call is pretty lovely. So
thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So let's
it has
what's that, Tracy? I didn't hear you.
It has been really nice to reconnect.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So Tracy, go ahead and take it away. I think we're ready
to share my screen. Okay. Let's see here. Are you everyone able to see that?
I apologize. I meant to talk a little bit about just the housekeeping things, and I didn't do that earlier. So Tracy, I'm going to jump in and just remind people that they are muted right now, or they should be, and to remain mute if possible until the end. We'll give people a chance to ask questions. But the way I want you to ask questions is to please use the chat and go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and then we'll be able to do the question part sort of efficiently, and that'll be really helpful. And also just to note to everybody that this program is being recorded, so you should know that, and you should also be aware that we can share this recording on our website. So if you have friends and neighbors who want to check it out later, it'll be available later on. So sorry, Tracy, but I wanted to make sure I got that in.
Great. No, that's perfect. Okay. Can everyone see my screen okay? See a loon? I'll take that as a yes.
Yes. Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, well, thanks for having me, and I'm really excited to be here. I wish we could be in person. And also, yeah, thanks, Sarah, and all of Coastal Rivers for having me. So I'm, Tracy Hart, here to talk about common loons. Basically, how are they doing, and what's unique and special about them, and what are some of the threats, and then also what you can do to help protect loons. So that's what we're going to try to cover. We're going to have about 20 minutes and time for questions. But one of the first questions I often ask is, why do we focus on common loons? So Maine has something close to 300 species of birds. So why this one? And I think one of the answers is kind of looking at you right there in this picture. So with that bright red eye and the vibrant colors of the breeding plumage and the iridescent head, their parental care, just all the things that make a loon, I grab our hearts, and we are loony about loons when we're in Maine. So that's focusing on something that people care about is a great way to interest people in the natural world and conservation. So that's one reason. But loons are also really important to Maine's economy, as you probably know. So many businesses use loons to advertise their business. And many of those have nothing to do with loons, but because we love loons, it's a real driver. And then thirdly, loons are indicator species. So they can tell us a lot about lake health, as you probably know, as part of the Pond Association. They're a visual predator that needs clean, clear water to be able to catch their prey. And they're also very vulnerable to certain pollutants like mercury and lead. So if we are seeing a thriving population of loons, that means that our lakes are probably quite healthy. Okay, so that's kind of the why we focus on loons at Maine Audubon. But now I want to tell you just a little bit about loons. And I'd love to hear what you've seen when we get to the question and answer period. Well, the first thing is that common loons are the only loon species to breed in Maine. There are 5 different species of loons in the world, and this is the only one that breeds here on our lakes. So you can occasionally see the red-throated loon out on the coast, off the coast of Maine in winter, but the Pacific and the yellow-billed and the Arctic loon, those are either really infrequent or never here. So we're lucky to have the common loon. Common loons also, they stand out because they are very big. If you've ever come close to one, you'll know what I mean. But usually I have a mount with me that I can show people just how large they are. But they have a 4-foot wingspan, and they're close to 3 feet long. And they're also really heavy. So they're around 9 pounds. And to put that in perspective, they're about the same length and the same weight as a bald eagle. So it's quite a large bird. And something else that's kind of fascinating is that Maine's loons are actually heavier than loons in other regions. So where 9 pounds is the average across the board, in Maine, a female can be about 10 pounds and a male will average around 13. You can even get up to 15 pounds. So they're very heavy. And one of the things that heaviness does is it lets them be very good divers. Loons are really built as diving machines. So unlike many birds, they have solid bones. So most birds will have honeycombs, hollow bones, but many of the bones in a loon are solid. They're also very streamlined. If you can see in that skeleton, just how long the neck is and the wings tucked in, and those feet way on the back of their body. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but that really helps them with maneuvering underwater and propulsion. They are lean, mean diving machines. But what makes them excellent divers also makes it really hard for them to take flight. Their weight means that it can take them up to about 1/4 of a mile of open water to be able to get off the water. And if you've ever seen it, they'll flap their wings strenuously and run across the water for a long way. And they can't take flight from land. So normally that works out okay, but occasionally if they get blown down while they're flying, or if they wait too long to go to the ocean in the winter, then they don't make it off their lake. So it can be an issue. Loons eat almost exclusively fish. So often it's perch and bass, but it can be anything that's common on a lake. But they also will eat crustaceans and insects and things if necessary. And like this picture shows that sometimes they bite off a little bit more than they can chew. And sometimes loons will even take a fish that's so big that it will kill them. Yeah. All right, and then I also get asked, where are loons at different times of the year and what are they up to? So this map here is it's a 10,000-foot view of what loons are up to. So the blue, unfortunately it's blue, but this is their summer breeding areas. And you can see that Maine is right here in the summer breeding area. But what a lot of people don't know is how much time they actually spend on the ocean off the coast. they actually spend more time out on the ocean than they do on their breeding lakes. So both in the wintertime, and then young loons who are between 1 and 3 years old, they will stay on the ocean for the whole summer and won't return until they're ready to start defending territories. So that's kind of what a loon life looks like from a map, but out on the water, it can look something like this. So in early spring, you might see fighting. The day that the lake melts or the day after, male loons will start coming back to a lake, and they will get there early to establish the best territories. And they're only territorial during the breeding season. In some of the fights, you can see this one looks pretty rough, and many of them are really dramatic, and sometimes they result in death. So, you know, territorial fights are a big deal. And this right here, I'm going to play what's known as a yodel. This is one that's done only by males. It's not quite as well known as the laugh of the loon, but it's used to advertise and defend territories. And they also use it when they're stressed or threatened. So if you were to hear it, it would mean you were probably too close. And it's often accompanied by this penguin dance, where they stand erect and push their chest out and their head back and move across the water. So I will. There it is. So I'll be curious to know how many people have heard that one. It's not quite as well known. And then this one, well, actually I'll start with, instead of with the call, I'll start with that as soon as the territories are established, females come a few days later and they join the male in the territory, and then courtship begins. And that means the pair will start swimming together and making some short dives. And then eventually they go to land to mate, and nest building will begin. What people don't know is that loons don't actually mate for life. So that their average pair bond lasts for about 7 years. And that usually changes if a male takes over a territory, or sometimes a mate just doesn't come back in the spring. So, and if there's a nest failure too, that can be another reason why mates will change. But a tremolo, or the laugh of the loon that many of us associate with loons, that's one that mates do as part of their pair bond. It can also be when they're stressed or threatened. So again, if you hear it, it probably means you're too close. And this is the only one that's used in flight. And most people think that's where loons have gotten their name, the loony call. Okay, and then nesting begins. Both parents are involved in building the nest, and they build it right on the water's edge, because if you remember their legs being really far back on their body, they can't really maneuver on land. So they need to be able to slip off the nest easily. And then eggs start being laid, usually starting around mid-May and then going until about mid-June. And yeah, and both parents are involved in incubation. It takes about a month for the eggs to incubate. Usually males will take the day shift and females take the night shift, and they don't sleep at all while they're incubating on the nest. And hatching. So hatching will continue often to the middle of July. Loons can only raise one clutch of chicks each year, but if the first nest fails, they can re-nest. So sometimes eggs will be hatching much later, past the middle of July, if they're on a second nesting. And we often, for the loon count, we don't always have all of the chicks hatched by then. There are still eggs on the nest on the 3rd week of July. Okay, and these are the chicks. So you can see here sibling rivalry happens even right out of the nest. They're fighting with each other and they're barely out of the egg. But luckily they don't stay on the nest long. They can leave the nest almost immediately, but they can't feed themselves and they can't defend themselves. They need their parents for both of those things. And at this stage, they're weighing about the same weight as a stick of butter, so about 1/4 pound. And they're covered in this very dark, fluffy down. Soon after, they take to the water, and for the first week, and especially the first few days, chicks are riding a lot on the back. I hope you've all had a chance to see that sometime in your life. It's a pretty beautiful sight. But they do that to conserve some heat and to rest. and probably first and foremost to get some protection from predators. So eagles and snapping turtles and things like that. Okay, 2 to 3 weeks old, they're starting to elongate. Their bodies are elongating, and also their beaks are elongating. And they might be 7 times their hatching weight at this point. And they'll start riding less on their parents' backs by about 3 weeks. Okay, 4 weeks, they look like this, a very messy look. They're starting to get in some of their contour feathers. They're losing their baby down here so that you can see on their breast and then up on near their beak that, yeah, you can see all of those messy featherness at this age. And at 6 to 7 weeks, they're just continuing to grow and they're continuing to molt. And they have both downy feathers that you can see here and there, and then they are also starting to get their contour feathers. Okay, and then by 8 weeks, they are basically teenagers. So they're gaining independence, but they still depend on their parents to help feed them. They are capturing sometimes about 50% of their daily food needs. And at this point, they really only have small little tufts of down. They're mostly in their juvenile plumage at this point. Okay, 9 to 10 weeks, they're looking like this. Solid contour feathers, and they're capturing most of their food at this point. And at this point, one parent may actually leave to go to the ocean. The other one will stay with their chicks. And by 12 weeks, this is a bird that's basically ready to fly to the coast. So this is fledging age. And they're catching their food, they're able to fly. And this is when the second parent will often leave and start migrating to the coast. They will stay on their lake for a few more weeks before they go to join the rest of the loons, the adult loons on the ocean. Okay. And this is what it looks like in the fall. So while they're so territorial, during the breeding season, you'll start to see this social rafting behavior in the fall. You can have as many as 20 loons. You can also see this sometimes during the breeding season. If a nest has failed, they'll sometimes join other loons. Or if there are a lot of loons who are not nesting or breeding, then you'll also see them rafting other times of the year. But it's very much a fall thing. And this is what they look like in winter while they're on the coast. So they look quite similar there, the juvenile plumage, you see that, and the winter plumage, just a few differences. Okay, so now, while they're going through that whole cycle, there are quite a few different threats that loons face. This is the laundry list of threats that I show, but I won't go through all of them now. I'm gonna talk more about 3 of them. One I wanted to point out is that people don't think a lot about the perils that loons face while they're on the ocean, but ocean oil spills and bycatch from fishing, they can also be affected during the winter time. And disturbance is one of the major threats that loons face. Recently, in the last few years, collisions with boats have become the leading cause of mortality for loons in Maine. Boats can also the wakes can wash eggs out of nests. Loud noises like fireworks and airplanes and boats can flush adults from a nest, and that leaves them out in the elements where predators can get to them, where they can overheat. And so many people want to get a really good picture of loons. We love them, so we want to see them and photograph them. But those actions can interrupt feeding, and it can separate parents and chicks.
There you go.
That is a growing and major issue in Maine right now. And also habitat loss and water quality. So I've mentioned that loons need really clear water to be able to catch their prey. And they also need to be right near the water's edge to nest. So things like shoreline development can both affect their nesting habitat, and it can affect water quality as runoff goes off from construction sites. And you can also have runoff from lawns, and leaking septic systems can all affect water quality, which I'm sure you're all probably pretty aware of that with your involvement with the Pond Association. Okay, so lead poisoning. Up until recently, this was the leading cause of adult death lead poisoning from lead tackle. In a 25-year study, about a third of all loon deaths were from lead tackle, and entanglement caused another 5% of those deaths. You can see here in this X-ray that there is a piece of loon tackle. They get the tackle either by catching a fish that's on a hook or one that swallowed a hook, or they can also get it from the lake bottom. The loons need to get pebbles and they store it in their gizzard, and that will help them break down their food. But it's very hard for them to see lead if it's there on the lake bottom. So just take a second and see if you can find some lead pieces in that picture. All right, there they are. So you can see if you were underwater, it could be very hard to sight these. So. Okay, but thankfully there is a lot that you can do to help loons. So the Maine annual Loon Count that we've mentioned already, and some of you are part of, happens on the third Saturday of July each year, and it gives a snapshot of the population on different lakes and throughout the state. So each year we have about 1,000 volunteers or more join us. Last year it was more, it was closer to 1,400 volunteers. And what this gives us first is some running data for specific lakes, so people can track how adults and chicks are doing on their lakes. So this is for Pemaquid. I thought might be relevant to some of you. And we have a full 36-year history of loon data for Pemaquid Pond. Also, we get a population estimate. Unfortunately, while we count in a lot of northern lakes, unfortunately right now we're not able to make a population estimate for the northern half of the state. We just don't have enough coverage from counters. So we do get an estimate though for the southern half of Maine. And here on this graph, you can see adults. This is the trend. And here are chicks in the red. So the overall population since the Loon Count started, now 37 years ago, has been positive, and now it is holding steady. Now it's been, and we also in Maine right now have more loons than any other state in the Northeast. We're hoping that it stays strong like this, but there are a lot of threats facing them. So I'm going to go over a few more things that you can do to help keep that trend steady. One is you can help get the lead out. I know, Carolyn, you were part of this, and thanks for all your work on that. But if you're an angler yourself, you can help by fishing lead-free, and you can help spread the word about lead alternatives. Here on the right are all the different non-lead tackle alternatives, and from bismuth and steel and brass and tin. And there is a law in Maine that bans the use and sale of sinkers and lead-headed jigs that are 1 ounce or less or 2.5 inches or less. And that has done a lot to help get lead out of our lakes and ponds. You can also help us get the word out about what's called the Maine Lead Tackle Buyback Program. This is a new program. We're partnering with the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and we're providing $10 vouchers through retailers, participating retailers. If you bring in 1 ounce or more of lead tackle, you get a $10 voucher to buy lead-free tackle. And there are, in our pilot year, we have 3 participating retailers on Moosehead Lake in Auburn and in Chesterville, Backwoods Bait and Tackle, Dag's Bait Shop, and Indian Hill Trading Post. And there'll also be an event in September, just a one-time event at Kittery Trading Post, where they'll be handing out vouchers. So help us get the word out, and if you have some tackle, please bring it in to one of these retailers. All right, you can also help prevent disturbance. You can view from a safe distance. You can avoid nesting areas, and whether they're marked or not, like with signs shown here, the Look Out for Loon signs. And you can also help spread the word and observe the no wake law. So in Maine, if you are within 200 feet of shore, you have to travel at speeds that don't produce wake. And now that fireworks, if consumer fireworks are legal, also trying to encourage fireworks to be far away from nesting areas. I often get asked how far you should be from a loon. And you can sometimes say the 100 yards, but I like to say more that you should read the behavior of the loon. If you see things like the penguin dance or crouching on a nest like this, or hiding on the water and yodeling, that means you're too close. And that's a better indication of whether you're disturbing the loons or not. Because there's a lot of variability. Some are very tolerant and others can take really any disturbance at all. And lastly is the Lake Smart program and Loon Smart program. This is something you can do to help protect habitat and water quality. So through these programs, there are steps you can take as a lakeshore property owner to improve the quality of habitat and water quality. And you can get a certificate after you've done those steps to show that you are Loon Smart and Lake Smart. I also did put this on here. We can cover this more in the questions, but it's very helpful if we recover loons that are dead. They can tell us a lot about what problems are facing loons and what the major issues are. So we can go back to this if you're interested and talk about what to do if you find a dead loon. Okay, and that's it for now. Thank you. And there's my phone number and my email address, and I'd love to hear from you. I'll go ahead and.
Great. No, that's wonderful, Tracy. I can give you some of the questions that people have been putting in the chat and give you a chance to respond to those. So thanks everybody for using the chat. That's helpful. And I'll be able to share those with Tracy. So, and you can go ahead and put some more questions in if you still have burning questions. But let's start with, Dan asked, maybe I missed it, what's the average lifespan of a loon?
Yeah, loons they're long-lived. So they can live, I think the longest living one that we know of right now is right around 30 years. And so yeah. So we don't actually know the average. It's hard to track that, but we know they're long-lived, and 30 years is our longest running tally.
Great. And Carolyn asks, how old do they have to be of breeding age?
Breeding age, normally they'll stay on the ocean for 1 to 3 years, then they'll come back. And it's often not until 4 to 6 years that they start breeding.
Yeah. Yeah, that's on par with other big birds like eagles, actually.
Yeah.
So Joan asks, do you think the numbers have gone up, or are we just having more people out there counting?
That's a great question. So we definitely have had more counters, but this is what we use for the population estimate is a random sample, and it's a weighted statistic that takes into account things like that. And it also takes into account lake size. So it is a fairly consistent methodology that does account for more people out there, but it certainly helps to have more people counting for accuracy reasons.
That makes sense. And Carolyn asks, are the loons that were transplanted from Maine, relocated, are they thriving in Massachusetts, or do you know what the status is of them?
Yeah, the reports are that they've done very well. So the Biodiversity Research Institute is bringing some loons captured from Maine and New York and bringing them down to Massachusetts to try to reestablish the population there. And I did hear that there was a first successful nesting. So they had some fledgling, they had some fledglings come back. So I know it was successful because some that nested and fledged last year actually made it.
Great. And Margaret mentions that in the past few years, loons at our end of the lake, which I think is Pemaquid, but she might want to correct me, have had unsuccessful nests. One year, this must have been the result of a predator. This year, the nest was flooded. Can we put out a floating loon's nest next spring?
Yeah, so a lot of people do ask that. We often say they can be very helpful with productivity if they address the right questions. So like you said, that the heavy rains, and if you're on a place with a dam, having a floating nest can be a really good way to protect them from rising and falling lake levels. Because being right next to the shore, they're really susceptible to flooding. So that's one. Predation, we say less so. There are some devices coming up that are eagle deterrents, and they can be effective, but a lot of people think that natural nests can be as good for things like eagle deterrents. But we normally say that to wait on a lake until there hasn't been any productivity for at least 3 years, and then consider whether a raft could help out with the productivity there.
Okay, that's helpful.
Because they do take maintenance too. So you have to be really dedicated to maintaining the rafts for them to work. The natural nest can be easier in that way.
Okay, great. Marty asks, with boaters causing serious threats to loons sometimes, what is being done to increase boater awareness? And I'll talk a little bit about what we're planning and hoping to do in this area, but if you want to talk about some statewide initiatives, that would be helpful.
Right. Yeah, I might let you take that one, but yeah, so there's some legislation that people have been looking into since wake boats are new on the scene. So people are starting to think, are the protections we have online now, are they sufficient for things like wake boats where the wake can travel a lot further? And then there is a lot of reports right now of people not respecting that no wake law that I mentioned. So the law is there, but people are worried that, especially lately, and it seems even more with the COVID times, that people are not paying attention to that rule.
Yeah, I can just add about our conversation. Tracy and I were recently talking about, maybe we need on a statewide level, and especially here, we can use our courtesy boat inspector folks to help with that education process. So a courtesy boat inspector person who's standing at a landing can, in addition to talking about their invasive species concerns, with a boater that's approaching them, they can also talk to that person about, hey, there's a nest, or we've seen loons out there, and you really, if you see any behavior that indicates the loons are stressed, it's a good point that a point of contact that we can try to provide more education and hopefully initiate conversation with people who are headed out on the water.
Yeah, I would love to work more with the courtesy boat inspectors, and I think the CBIs and loon counters have been key in getting the word out about what it takes to protect loons from wakes and from collisions with boats. So it's a really critical role in education. I would also say that with posting signs, that's another question we get a lot. So I showed that yellow "Look out for loon" signs. It's kind of a judgment call on whether they should go out right near the nest, or if it's better to arrange to have them on a boat ramp or somewhere that it just generally says, hey, there's a loon here, watch out. Because if you have it right near the nest, that can attract people. People love loons, and it can often bring people to the nest. So we often say, if you think that nest is going to be disturbed anyways, it's right in a traffic area, then go ahead, put the sign right next to the nest. But if not, maybe you want to keep it a little hidden and put the sign at an entrance point instead.
Great. This is good guidance. So things for all of us to think about. Well, we've come to the end of the questions that are here. Folks should certainly feel free to reach out to Tracy. She provided her contact information, but also if you don't have that and you want me to forward questions to her, that's wonderful. We're happy to help that process along. So Tracy, thank you so very much for joining us this evening. You are welcome to stay on the call.
Okay, and if I do have some other data from the other ponds, Biscay and Weber, and so if people want that, I can send that along via email. So just let Sarah or me know, and I can send on more information.
Yeah, Tracy, we're going to be doing a follow-up email actually to this with sort of list of resources that people are probably going to be wanting as a result of this conversation. So that would be great if you want to provide.
That's great. Yeah, because we also have a new brochure that shows sort of where loons are at different times of the year, and it has some of the rules for protecting loons. That's called Living in Loon Territory. So I can send out links to that and to the poster about the lead buyback program.
Great.
Great. Well, thanks very much for having me.
It was wonderful to have you. So thanks very much. And thanks to Audubon for all this work. And
yeah, thank you too for all your work. So I'll go ahead and mute myself, and yeah.
Okay.
Take care, everyone.
Great. All right. So, well, that was wonderful and pretty special to be able to learn sort of intimately about the loons. We are going to kind of transfer here into the part of the program that I would like to share with you. Let's see if I can share my screen with you appropriately. I'm moving it, so I apologize. Okay, so let's see here. Hannah, can you unmute yourself and tell me if you can see my slide appropriately?
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Stephen and Hannah. All right. So I wanted to use this opportunity to talk about freshwater stewardship in this region and draw our attention to the kingfisher, our new logo. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but also what I'd like to share with you this evening is a little data and information, most of which has been, excuse me, contributed by volunteers directly to Lake Stewards of Maine or the DEP in some cases. And I will be sharing that, although it's not information that I personally collected. So a big call out to the volunteers throughout this and to Carolyn also, because she has been such a big part of helping all of that information and data get to where it needed and training the volunteers for these programs. So we'll go over some of the ongoing current projects and programs and talk a little about a new initiative that I'd like to talk with you about and go over some of the questions that were turned into me earlier. And if we have time, we can wrap up and go back to the chat and see if there's any final questions, and Hannah can help facilitate that. We also may have time at the very end. There's a website with a lot of water quality data information that if I have people who are interested, we might look at that together, so I can show you how to work with that. It's pretty interesting. So I just want to mention that we have this new logo that Hannah designed, and the kingfisher is shown there on the left. You can see both the female with the chestnut kind of streak on her chest and the male above her and then in flight. And we chose the kingfisher for a number of reasons, but partly because it does connect as a symbol the marine and the fresh water, because they hunt and live in both environments. And they also are an animal that connects the water where they hunt with the land. They literally will burrow into sandy banks and make their tunnels, their nests at the end of the tunnels. And then of course, the air where they're flying. So they're quite a strong symbol for us, we felt like. So thank you, Hannah, for that work in designing that logo. So here's our current map of where we are and where we work. I was aware that, you know, sometimes on these Zoom meetings, we sometimes are fortunate to have people from other places join us. It sounds like most of you are intimately connected to this place, but that's not always the case on Zoom meetings. And Carolyn found this great quote: the people of Maine should keep in mind that they're the actual owners of the lakes of Maine and of the waters contained in them. And these lakes and this water are public property of inestimable value. And that was a Governor Baxter quote that she found. A very appropriate kind of a sentiment to share at this point. So in terms of data that's out there, and you all, many of you have been collecting this for a number of years, and a big shout out especially to Steve O'Brien, who I think has been doing this more than 30 years, where he's collected information and provided it to, in this case, the Lakes Environmental Association. So I don't know if Steve can actually, I'm not sure. He may just be listening and not and not be able to write out in chat or anything or fill me in. But Steve and a number of other volunteers have been involved in this and other data collection. So with respect to climate change, you know, we would often think, well, certainly in the marine environment and other places, we are seeing in general, I would say, that there is less ice and it's not there as long and it isn't as thick. And I think a lot of people can anecdotally point to their own lives and or their, you know, their families' homestead perhaps, and know where the ice was and where it's not it's not as there as it's not as present as it was, you know, several decades ago. So here's a chart that shows Pemaquid, Muddy Paradise, and Bisky, and you'll see that, you know, across the bottom there are the year, and then the ice out date is you know, on the vertical column there. And the reason why there are line segments instead of a continuous line is because the data is it was given for a period of time, and then for some reason it wasn't collected or it wasn't entered. I'm not sure, but I think, you know, there isn't a clear trend here, and you know, some people are a little surprised by that, but I think what it points to is that, you know, the ice out and the climate change questions are they're climate issues, and so we're talking about long periods of time that we need to have this data in order to see trends. And so it would be unlikely, honestly, to see 2013 to 2020 to really see a dramatic and clear delineated kind of a trend. And so it isn't surprising to me, at least, that this is the case, but what it points to is the need for ongoing data so that we can really start to have the information over time that we need to understand what the impacts are. And you know, as people are more transient, you know, we don't live in the same place for our whole lives, so we don't necessarily have that personal history with a place the way I think people did in the past, or families would, you know, that there was a lifestyle perhaps of getting out on the ice and ice fishing. That was maybe part of the traditions. And here, we're more transient these days, not during COVID, but the rest of the time we are. And so, you know, our lifestyle is not necessarily as connected to some of these phenological events like ice in and out. This data is available on the Lakes Environmental Association website, and you too can go ahead and take a look at it at any point. And so, you know, next year, if you want to kind of look at it again and see how different it might look, there's no analysis. I did the graph, but my intent is to continue to graph as people collect data, and then we can continue to share this information out with the public. Go ahead and, you know, use your chat when you're ready to. We can gather questions about any of this at any point. So on the lakesofmaine.org website, you can find some great information, some data. This is a screenshot, and I specifically used a screenshot to kind of show you what the website looks like. So you can go to a specific pond, you can ask for specific data, and you can get information about transparency and chlorophyll and phosphorus and all temperature and a number of other parameters. And I think it would be a whole nother presentation for us to a whole nother evening for us to sit and kind of go through some of, you know, what is transparency, what is the implication of it, this data, and you know, what is the histories of this information on Pemaquid, for example. So that'd be something we could certainly do in the future, is to go through the water quality data specifically. But I do want to kind of point to a few things with respect to this data. So this is Pemaquid Pond. This is, again, a screenshot of that same website on lakesofmaine.org. And you can click on any of these graded variables, and it will give you specific information about the sites that are on those bodies of water. And so, for example, I clicked on it and took a screenshot of it, and this is phosphorus. This is sites 1 and 2 that are delineated on that map that you can't probably see very easily, that's on that same website page. And it will give you the average scores for phosphorus in the lake, and it's in comparison to that. Those bars are comparing it to data across the state. And so you can get a sense of kind of what the averages are in other places compared to where you are specifically interested in. So it's a really interactive site. It's terrific information. You know, and then if we were to look at this closely, you know, we'd need to look at, you know, what are the standards? What's the permitted values of phosphorus, for example? And is this body of water attaining those standards, or is it not attaining those standards? And what does that mean? And it's usually not a clear-cut kind of a situation where some of the time it will attain standards and some of the time it won't attain standards. And what are the implications for plants and animals and us in that case? But I just wanted to show you that the data is available thanks to those volunteers who have been collecting it in collaboration with these organizations like Lakes of Maine and the Lake Stewards of Maine. So, and this is just to show you, so this is Biskie Pond. So, you know, there's one site in Biskie where they've taken samples, and this is the phosphorus. And so it's showing you the percent of time that the phosphorus is meeting, and this is in parts per billion. So, and that's out of the graying bars are the total number of lakes that are shown in this are 903. So lots of information available. So I also want to talk a bit about some of the other projects that are going on and programs that are going on with us and in collaboration with Healthy Beaches. This image is the volunteers at Pemaquid Beach, but we have volunteers also taking samples for the swim beach monitoring program at Biskie Beach. And normally we would also be taking them at Bristol Mills, but the site there is under construction until August 1st. So there's no, I'm sorry, until, actually, I'm not sure what the date is right now, but it's still not being swum in is my understanding. So we are not doing any monitoring right there, but it may be beyond August 1st that it's actually going to be closed. And so the volunteers are going out, they're collecting samples. The samples are being run at a water quality lab in Rockland. This image is of the Healthy Beaches trainer just checking off that these volunteers are following protocol. They passed with flying colors. And so the volunteers are engaged initially in a training and then in taking samples. And one of the questions about what opportunities are there for volunteers to get involved, and water sampling is one of them. Now, this year we have had to make some changes. The couple who is monitoring here is obviously a household, and so that's why they are monitoring together. We don't generally, right now, we don't have volunteers monitoring who are not within the same household. But we do have household members going out together for safety reasons when they're near the water. So the data that's being collected has shown that these sites that are being monitored, and it's right now it's just Biskie and Pemaquid, and both sites are showing very clean water, certainly attaining standards, and we have not seen any significant issues this year at all. So, and in general, they are very clean sites. So that's great. And we want to keep it that way. Tracy already talked about the lead tackle exchange program, but I did just talk to Tracy and she has about this specifically, and she has offered that we could join in her program. And I have put out a call actually to one of the local tackle stores, and we haven't connected yet, but we're hoping that we can get some of these vouchers into the hands of people buying tackle locally, and hopefully make a difference in getting some of the old tackle out of use. And specifically, Carolyn actually had a recent lead tackle exchange where a person who's in our community brought the lead tackle in, and Carolyn was able to provide a lead-free tackle. So good going, Carolyn. Lake Smart is continuing, and we've heard quite a bit about Lake Smart recently. both through Tracy and in general. So this is a program that is an education program where people can earn a certification of sorts. It's a free and non-regulatory, completely voluntary program. I am currently working with about 4 homeowners, and we kind of have a few in the wings who have indicated interest, which is wonderful. So my intent is to go forward with those folks, and they initially do a survey to start gaining some understanding of what's required in Lake Smart to attain the certification, and then we'll work with them and find out, you know, what their concerns are, and look at their property with an eye towards water quality. And one of those questions was fairly leading, I would say, in the poll, which we haven't got back to yet, I realize, but the poll, you know, asks you, what do you do on your property? And there's all sorts of a wide variety of things that homeowners can do. And I think that Lake Smart is looking really strong in terms of having lots of folks, lots of interest, which is wonderful. In the past, Carolyn's engaged a lot of volunteer involvement with Lake Smart, but at this point we are not involving volunteers very much in Lake Smart. That's kind of just backing off with that in particular.
Excuse me, Sarah, one moment.
Yeah.
I've heard from a couple people who were trying to get into the meeting. Do you want to make me the host again so I can let people in, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Except I can't. Let's see. I can't see my, whoop, shoot. Let's see. I'm gonna back out of that, and let's see. Bear with me, folks. I admitted them, Hannah.
Oh, okay.
And then I'll make you the host again. Thank you. Okay. Any other housekeeping things, Hannah?
I'm in.
Great.
Then, hurrah. Okay, great. Okay, let's go back to looking at, pardon me, there we are. So I just want to talk a little bit about the Invasive Plant Patrol crowd and program. These are folks who take on areas of the shoreline, and they monitor for potentially invasive species or invasive species of aquatic plants. This is hard work. Identifying aquatic plants is notoriously challenging, as you can see by some of those little images of the Eurasian water milfoil on the right there. And a lot of people sort of, you know, assume this is coming from maybe, you know, a boat in some far-flung place, but I included this map right off the DEP website of some of the local infestations. And the yellow squares, they are variable leaf milfoil, and the blue circles are hydrilla. And there's a couple other culprits in that map as well. I just want to draw attention to the fact that, you know, this is part of the reason why this patrol is so important, is because these plants really are right around us. And it would be very simple for somebody to take their boat trailer, get some little bit of plant on it in some very local place. And the next weekend they come to our peninsula and they back their trailer in, and it completely inadvertently, not even knowing the plant is there, they have deposited a piece of plant. A lot of these plants can vegetatively reproduce, and so they don't need to produce seeds. They're just able to start growing right from a little piece. And so, you know, the potential is high, and the damage can be great in terms of the impact. And so a a lot of you are involved in this type of work, either through the courtesy boat inspections or through the invasive plant patrol. This is actually a program I would like to continue to grow in the near future. You know, we could get people sort of claiming areas of the shoreline as their patrolled area, and increase our, and this is actually one of Carolyn's suggestions, in fact, you know, to increase the coverage and make sure that we're doing a good job of patrolling. So, and along with that is our courtesy boat inspections program. This is Lulu Linkus. She is our courtesy boat inspector. She's been working this summer over at the Pemaquid Landing. She's great, and she's been doing a really good job of guarding the waters against invasive plants. So she goes out and she talks to people who are pulling their boats up, and she inspects the trailers and the boats themselves, and tries to provide some information about what the potential implications are of invasive species. And so she's saying that a lot of the boat owners are very educated. They're very accustomed to having their boats inspected. She's doing both motorized and non-motorized boats, which I think is key. She has found some. They were dried and not really presenting a threat, but she had found some plant material on kayaks, for example, and it has the potential to cause a problem, just like on a motorboat. So it's not just the motorboats that are a potential issue there. And we're really enjoying having Lulu around as an intern. I mean, unfortunately, at this time, it's you know, it's challenging. I actually have met with her face to face only a few times and for brief amounts of time. So we did her training online, but it's been great to feel like we are providing some leadership for young people to get into fields of conservation. And she didn't know about this program before she jumped into it, and she's learned a great deal, I think, in a short amount of time. So that's nice for us to be able to bring people into this kind of work. And it's something that she is really focused on with her academic work. So it's great. So just briefly, you know, what are our goals in the future? And certainly maintaining all these important programs is key. And as we talked about before, collecting data can't stop, because as Larry Mayer, who I work with a lot of on our marine water quality work, says, you know, once that water's gone into the bridge, it's gone. So, you know, if you don't take that data from that body of water at that time, that information is not recoverable. And I think it's a good point for us to, you know, in terms of maintaining water quality monitoring programs and all of these programs, it's important to continuously collect information and data and manage it and provide it to the public in a way that is informative. So one of the new goals I think that we should be working towards is creating a watershed management plan that integrates marine and freshwater data with information and results in prioritized action items. So for example, you know, it's a combination of looking at a variety of aspects of our communities and our environment, and looking at how we live on the landscape and prioritizing where we want to and how we can best make impact on behalf of clean water and the animals and plants that live there. So you guys asked the greatest questions on earth leading up to this. So I want to try to attend to some of those great questions before we move on. So one person asked, mentioned that they'd be interested in a report on this year's loon count in the state of Maine. And so Tracy's going to get more information to us about that, but I'm sure a lot of information is still being tabulated too. It's just from this year, but we'll try to, you know, maintain this relationship certainly, so we can get reports from the loon counts onto our websites and links and so forth. So thanks, Tracy. And do loons live on rivers like the Damariscotta River? And the answer is yes, they sure do. They winter on the Damariscotta estuary, and oftentimes there are singles that stay out at sea, or in, they're the young ones that are not nesting yet. And so this is something that Tracy mentioned, but specifically related to the Damariscotta, yes, they're on the Damariscotta, and some of those birds that are not yet of age to reproduce are out there, and they're fishing on the Damariscotta. So changing birds here. Somebody asked in the questions, geese, are they a problem, and what do we do about them? So are they a problem is a good question. And in order to really know the impact, we need water quality information, and we need specifically information that's telling us about bacteria and nutrients in the water that would be potentially related to the geese, and then kind of assessing, like, are the geese the problem, or there can be other sources of those problems as well. We can also start by evaluating the landscape and implement buffers, because the geese are they're on our lawns and any of those areas with short grass, because it's easy for them to see predators. They feel safe there, and they're adjacent to the water, so they're defecating, on the grass, and then is washing into the water. Their populations tend to go up when we have a lot of short grass and fewer buffer areas around the lakes and ponds. So we can talk more about this, and in fact I will be doing a program in the future specifically about buffer areas and how to, I'm sorry, my light's flickering, how annoying. But buffer areas, which are the vegetated areas between the shore and the upland areas. And if you increase the amount of vegetation there, the geese are not able to walk through it necessarily. They're not able to walk their goslings through it. And the buffers have a lot of other important functions, in that they are helping to filter out a lot of the potential nutrients that might be washing into the water. We do have a brochure about geese management on our website, and it talks about some of the options in terms of what can you do. So there are other options. I would say that evaluating the landscape is one of the primary ones that you need to start with. Are there volunteer opportunities with monitoring? There certainly are. It's a little more challenging at this particular stage with COVID, but there are opportunities. And so if you are interested in volunteering, I encourage you to reach out to any of us staff, and we will send you the volunteer survey and get your contact information and find out what specifically you're interested in doing. So that's a wonderful offer. I'm glad new people are jumping in. That's fabulous. And the next person asked, who do you complain to if neighbors on shorefront are not following shorefront zoning and requirements, with a whole bunch of potential issues, and are they established by the town or the state? So if you're having issues in a region, you need to start with by talking to the code enforcement officer, the CEO of your town. Your town will also be able to provide you with a shoreline zoning document for your specific town and a map of those zones. There is further assistance from the Maine DEP if you're not satisfied, if you feel like there's something not being attended to with respect to the shoreline zone. The state has a shoreline zone, a set of regulations, and those are available online. And then the town will layer their own regulations. Some towns don't have their own, but many towns will have their own regulations layered on top of the state. So I'm certainly happy to help try to interpret shoreline zone regulations if you're trying to understand what they mean. I did add that little picture there of how the measurements are made on the shoreline for setbacks, because that's often a point of question is, you know, when you're looking at the landscape, I don't know if you all can see my cursor, but we're not measuring this on the slope here, that, you know, 100 feet or 250 feet or whatever you're interested in is not being measured on the slope. The setback is, whoops, I'm so sorry. The setback is that top hard line, and that's the measurement that you're looking for with respect to setback. So that can be a significant confusion for folks when you're just eyeing a site and trying to get an idea as to whether a shoreline zone issue might be there or not. Will there be Lake Smart home visits, and are we planning to implement invasive plant shoreline patrols? I think I did talk about that. Yes, we're doing Lake Smart, and there'll be limited volunteer involvement this year, but we are continuing. And if you are interested in Lake Smart awards, I'd be happy to talk to you. So do email me or contact me. And I think I'm going to be working fairly soon on kind of boosting the invasive plant patrol program and trying to organize that in a way that seems positive for us moving forward. Somebody asked, no wake zones to protect our loons. How do we create that? How do we create no wake zones? So the first point is to Tracy's statement that she also highlighted, which is that no watercraft should be going greater than headway speed, which is just, you know, moving forward very slowly, just fast enough to make headway within what's called the water safety zone, which is the 200 feet of shore, which includes islands and so forth. And so, you know, if you are having concerns about speeds and wakes and things like that, I think there is two things. One is, you know, we can do more education and provide people with more information. And two, I think that people can reach out to Inland Fisheries and Wildlife and report those. And so in a few minutes, I'll give Tracy a chance to say something about that if she would want to, but there is a way to report those concerns as well. And so the final question was, is it possible to research whether there is or not there is a speed limit on the pond? And in general, I would say that, you know, you should go to the Boater's Guide to Maine Boating Laws and Responsibilities. It's online. You can get it from the Maine Lake Society, but it's also available in other places. In the back of that brochure, which is pretty hefty, there is a list of bodies of water and the specific regulations to them. So for example, there might say, for a given body of water might say, you know, only 10 horsepower motors are allowed, for example, that sort of thing. So, you know, if you're concerned about speed limits, you can look and see if there's special regulations for the particular body of water that you're on. And you can, you know, work towards making changes, but I actually need to do some more research about what the process looks like for making changes. I started on that endeavor, but it is a process, and it's through IFNW, is my understanding, to make changes along those lines. And I think that would be, you know, something that you'd have to garner support from a wide variety of people and wide range of people to attain that. Tracy, do you want to add anything about that? Hang on.
Yeah. I did just put a phone number in for the warden service at DIFNW. So that is the place to report any violations of the no wake law. So really that is the protection in place right now, is just within 200 feet of shore. And people are just starting to look at if it's sufficient for some of the new boats coming online. So we'll probably be seeing more bills introduced in the future.
Great. So that was the bulk of the questions. Hannah, did any other questions come in that we want to share as I was wrapping up there? Okay. I'll just say that, first of all, thank you. I feel like this is a super engaged group of people that it's really rewarding to be in touch with you, and I look forward to conversing with you more about this. My contact information is there, and of course the website's also a way to connect with us. So I think that brings us to a closure. Thank you very much, Tracy, again for joining us, Hannah for helping out, Stephen for introducing us, all our volunteers and our additional staff members for joining us today, like Joan and Carolyn. So,
Thank you, Sarah.
all right, my
And
pleasure.
everyone.
Best wishes for everybody. Have a lovely night.